Every fighter needs a cause. Every cause needs a fighter. The Sumud Podcast is sponsored by The Karate Attorney, fighting for justice inside and outside the courtroom. Visit karateattorney.com or follow on Instagram at karateattorney to learn more.
With non-Palestinians, they were reaching out to me, asking for my blessing if they could stitch our designs, sell them, and then donate the proceeds to charity. And this was really upsetting to me because Palestinians want to earn vocation. They don't want to receive charity. Wouldn't it be a better effort for you to just purchase embroidery from Palestinian refugee camps and cooperatives?
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever time zone you're living in, it's time for Sumud. All about humanity, so this right here for everyone. Uplift, amplify, empower everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever time zone you're living in, it's time for Sumud.
Visit sumudpod.com to subscribe and connect with us on social media. You can also support our work by contributing monthly on the Support Us page. Even $10 a month helps us continue amplifying Palestinian voices and those in solidarity. Thank you.
On this episode of the Sumud Podcast, we uplift, empower, and amplify.
Wafa Ghnaim.
Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So, when I started doing research on you, or about you rather, dress historian came up, researcher, author, archivist, curator. But with these in-person interviews, I decided that I don't want to really just give a bio for somebody. I want them to tell the audience or tell me who they are in their own words, because I feel sometimes the information that's out there is not essentially accurate for that time point of somebody's life. So why don't you introduce the world to who you are?
Yeah, I mean, thank you for that question, because I do feel that my work has evolved a lot over the years, and especially since I first became an author for Tatreez Tea, my first book. I think today I most identify with dress historian and fashion researcher. I think I used to be an embroidery historian, but I very much contextualized the embroidery. In order to do that, I had to look at the dress. And then when I looked at the dress, I had to look at the ensemble. And then it became about our fashion, our ancient fashion, traditional fashion, contemporary fashion, and all of that. And I think I also identify most as an embroiderer or an embroideress. In our community, there's so many titles and names for that. An artist, an artisan. I've always felt that I was an embroiderer and simply just that.
So when we talk about Tatreez, when you and I spoke over the phone, again, I think most of us are being reductive when we say that's just a symbol or a part of resistance. It's much deeper than that, correct? Can you just explain to our audience what that means?
Yeah. I view our dress and our embroidery in Palestinian culture as something so much more fantastic and beyond the colonial era of Palestinian life. I don't deny that it is a way to resist cultural erasure, and I think that's a very important part of our history, but we far exceed the colonial and Zionist timeline in our dress into the ancient world. We are expressing our identity, our social status, what we like, what we don't like, both men and women, since the ancient times. And I'm very inspired by this continuity, because we didn't start documenting patterns into books, which is also a kind of colonialism, right? Like documenting arts and culture on paper as a type of history relegates it to an ancient, distant past. But this is very contemporary, and it's continued through oral transmission for centuries with remarkable consistency. And I think that's worth talking about. I mean, we see European paintings from the 1400s by Gentile Bellini, like painting images of what they believe the Holy Land to look like. And the women are dressed in traditional Bethlehem ensembles. I mean, we have to look at the origins of this dress. And I find that to be maybe where not just resistance lies, but this very core sense of identity, something that I lean into and I've leaned into in my life. I hope that the next generation can lean, and even my generation now can lean into that as well. And hopefully my work presents that.
So if I give you the phrase reclaiming beauty as both a historical idea and a living force shaping power,
Yeah.
what would you say to that?
Yeah, I like that. I like that because it centers our beauty. And that's sort of the other part of where I think that I've reclaimed myself, is that I'm starting to look at like Arab beauty and Arab glamour. I guess it's no surprise growing up in the United States and even in the Middle East and even in Palestine, fil blad, I shouldn't say Middle East, Southwest Asia, North Africa. It's like there is this sort of white supremacist hold on beauty ideals, straightening the hair and bleaching your hair and wearing makeup and now filler and Botox and all that stuff. So I've been really looking at the 70s, 80s, 90s, and even prior, and how is beautification handled and practiced, I should say, during those time periods. That's where I started to get into headdresses and face veils from the Bedouin regions. Those are total beautification practices. And the Orientalist kind of scholarship on this topic focuses very much on dowry and property transfer of a woman to a man. What I see is that she's lined the face veil with gold coins on the bridge of her nose and near her eyes. So this to me is a type of makeup of the desert area. You wouldn't wear makeup, right, in a traditional sense, in the heat and you're outside and you have to protect your skin. This was their way of beautifying. And I love this idea of just recentering what we believe beauty to be and how it should be expressed.
So is that sort of your academic opinion as to why they were doing it?
That's just my theory.
Okay. No, that's brilliant.
And that's really where my doctoral studies are moving towards, is how are we able to understand face veils and headdresses outside of this idea of dowry and property transfer, because that's mainly how it's been documented. Yes, there's social status, but how do you explain silver medallions that are not currency coins? They're not just fake coins. They're decorative. What are they decorating? Their face. So what does that mean? Why did they do it? Why did they care? Why are there beads going down this way? Why did they embroider on their headband? Why is there a Brazilian coin that they couldn't use? They couldn't just take off and buy at the market. They're in Palestine. Why did they do that? So I think that so much identity lives in the material. And that's what excites me, is a little bit of that decoding that happens.
And we're losing past generations who hold this sort of historical data in their mind. How are you, because you are the one that I know, how are you specifically making sure that we're preserving that and we're able to sort of feed the next generation with this knowledge? A lot of pressure on you specifically.
I mean, I think it's a question I ask myself every day is what more can I do? Because Nakba survivors are in their 80s at the youngest. So I'm doing my best to center oral history. If somebody asks me, oh, how did you get the idea for that? It's because I got a clue in oral history. Like somebody told me a story, Miss Hanan Munayyir is somebody who peer reviews my research. My mother, Feryal Abbasi-Ghnaim. I've spoken with Wadad Kawar, but I've also spoken to her daughter, Mary Kawar, who leads the center. We're all having conversations. What I mean by oral history is when we sit and look at a dress, we're all giving our opinions. Oh, no, that's sewing machine. That couldn't have come until the 20s. No. I have evidence late 19th century. Oh, really? How did you what's your evidence? So these are the kinds of conversations that a single dress can produce. And then I gather questions from those conversations. So I'll ask a question nobody can answer, or I get the very funny answer. No one's asking that, Wafa. Don't ask that. Look at this. Ask about this.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, okay. And then later I'm like, well, I still have this question. So I go write it down. And then I start having all these questions that need to be answered. And that's when I have more conversations. So for me, in all of my academic work, I always use my bibliography as a place to show who I am and what sources privilege and what voices matter. And so for that, I cite my discussions. I'll take notes in my journal. And then when I'm writing, I note that date and that conversation, and I list it as an oral history interview.
So what's the biggest misconception about your work?
I think that mainly the biggest misconception in my work is that I'm focused on maybe just a single time period. of that pre-1948 period for Palestinian embroidery and dress, that sort of golden age of traditional fashion for our community. But really, I'm looking more broadly throughout the centuries. I'm looking into the ancient and traceable origins of our dress, and I'm even looking at iterations of contemporary fashion and how that might connect. I'm also looking at the broader Eastern Mediterranean region. I don't think that looking at just Palestinian dress is suitable, and I contextualize it very heavily within a regional framework so that I can understand the continuation of dress into Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, and even as far down as Egypt to help me create kind of a continuum of style. That is a form of decoloniality in fashion where I sort of break down the nation states as to what they were established as, and I look at the cultural communities that existed prior and the way they dressed.
There is an academic component here that is underappreciated. Could you unpack that academic piece?
Yeah, well, I think fashion history, fashion studies is kind of a new area in academia. It's a new discipline, I think, for all on all fronts, in the academy, but also in our culture, and especially in Palestinian culture. I think any sort of a focus on dress and embroidery has largely been relegated to women and has been viewed as sort of a domestic type of work. But I'm a historian, and this is being well acknowledged in academia and especially in the museum world. And I don't think that my work doesn't just sit in fashion history or cultural heritage. It's interdisciplinary. So I am engaging in all the ways that dress appears and functions and socializes with the world. I began in embroidery, so my focus has always been in symbolism. Even Tatreez Tea, when you read it, it's very focused on symbolism, the evolution of symbolism into the diaspora. So there's a symbolism, iconography, there's proper art history, I think, material analysis. So I'm looking at, is that cotton thread, silk thread? Is that, on a plain weave? How is that fabric woven? What are the techniques of the embroidery? So material analysis is a big deal. I engage in scientific research. Working with research scientists in art is a whole different world, which I absolutely love and could talk about forever. But, analyzing what is the metal component of this coin or decorative embellishment? Is it brass? Is it gilded with gold? Is it silver? Why does it have a lower silver content? Because it was the late Ottoman Empire. That's why there were less silver content in the coins. So all of that. Plus, I think there's this anthropological component to my work. And that's really where my activism, I think, comes in my research, is where I'm very much object driven and oral history driven. Now, these are two areas in the field that is still evolving in and of itself. So I'm very focused on oral histories. What do our elders say? What is being practiced today? What do they remember? And then on the other side of that, I think about the social life of an object. How many hands touched this? How many heads did the headdress live? What did it sound like? What did that sound mean for the woman who wore it? We're supposed to think that they were silent and sitting there quietly. They were jangling with coins on their head all day. And what happened when their leg hurt? And they were limping? Did their jangle change? And what did people say about that? That's interesting socially. So I love to think about the social life of an object itself. And I think that's where I become very emotionally invested in the dresses and the headdresses.
That is so deep and so amazing. Where did you get the motivation? I know you learned from your mother at a young age. I'm assuming dresses is the first thing you probably remember as a young child. Is that right?
Yeah. I don't have any memories in life where I wasn't helping my mom with the embroidery. But even on another note, even just my sister last week was like, you always got dressed up to go to the yard and rake leaves. I've always been in dresses and loved dresses and collected dresses and, different iterations throughout my life. But fashioning the body has always been something that I found to be very fun. And I think growing up with my mother, because I learned her embroidery and I helped her with her dresses, I learned about how she fashioned her body. And that's the intimacy of my relationship with my mother. So then I had a natural evolution in my work where I began to be interested in other mothers and the way that they fashion their body and who did this dress belong to and why don't we know her name? And can we find out who she was and how? And that's where I start to get very interdisciplinary, where I'm like, why does she have a Brazilian coin on her headdress? And it's like the 1930s headdress.
Yeah.
Did a tourist just kind of come by and give it to her? Like, how did she come across this? So I start to become very curious of these lives that once made them and wore them and lived in them. And their lives are really biographically inscribed in them. Yeah.
So every dress has a story.
Yeah. I think many stories.
So when people are growing up, they usually have some sort of escape, for example, basketball or music or volleyball or whatever it may be. For you, it was this, I'm assuming.
It was this and reading.
And what type of books did you read?
Oh, I don't know, probably Babysitter's Club and stuff. But as a child, I was bullied a lot. I'm tall. And I had really like big hair, a lot thicker than now. I had a funny name. I was in a predominantly white town. So I was bullied a lot and I didn't understand socially what was happening. I had impaired vision for a big part of my childhood before I got glasses. So a lot of times I was getting bullied by people I couldn't really see. And that scared me a lot. So I just focused on books and embroidery. And if anybody looks at pictures of me as a child, my face is like this with the embroidery and with my books, because that's what was happening. That was my circumstance at the time. So I very much am still that way. I find a lot of comfort with books and embroidery.
You were also bullied because of the dressing too, correct? Your mother, she came to school or something to that effect?
Yeah, I have a really powerful memory when we were in Boston, where I was born. My mom would wear her thobe to take us to school, and she would braid our hair. We had really long hair. And I just remember times when people would follow us and throw eggs at her embroidery, like on her body. And we were scared, but she just held us and took us to school. And there were also times like the first day of school. Well, at that time, first day of school was picture day. So for the first day of kindergarten, for instance, I wore a thobe and a headdress, because my mom wanted us to have our proper school picture in Palestinian dress. And we were bullied a lot, me and my older sister mainly, because my little sister was so much younger. By the time she went through, the teachers had wised up to kind of what was going on. But we were bullied so much that even on the same day, my older sister had taken off the headdress for her school picture. But for me, I kept mine on. But that just was fuel to the fire. We were already getting targeted for bullying by then. Yeah.
What has that impact really been on you, experiencing that at this age, at this point in your life?
I think for a long time, I tried to move on because it continued into high school. And I found myself and I found my voice like in my late teenagehood in a way that was very rebellious, even to my parents. And I should really write about this someday, but I even sewed my own clothes. I grew up in Portland, Oregon, so it was like very punk rock, hippie-ish kind of mix of stuff. And I sewed my own clothes, and my parents didn't like it, but I did what I wanted, and I rebelled. I rebelled to everyone, even in my needle and thread. And I think there was a period in my 20s where I really tried to kind of move forward and move away from that. But after I had my son in my 30s, now I'm in my 40s, I'm owning a little bit more of the essence of who I was before I was bullied, and realizing that that girl who didn't want to comb her hair and didn't want, it's like I didn't want it properly straight. And I always wanted to wear different colors, and I would put on little kitten heels to go rake leaves in the yard for my dad. Like, that girl is who I am, and I don't need to hide her anymore. And so it's sort of been this reclamation process. And it's no surprises. My son is about the age when I started to go into the yard. He's now about that age when I used to go in the yard in my like prom dresses to rake leaves. And so I'm sort of like reclaiming that sense of who I am and my essence. But it's been a journey for sure.
Yeah, so for most Palestinian families, you only get maybe 2 or 3 options as far as occupation goes, either a doctor, a lawyer, or engineer. For you, did they encourage you to go into those fields, or did they realize right away, no, this sort of focus is for you?
I think my parents always knew I was a strong writer. I still don't feel like I'm a very good writer.
You are an amazing writer. Let's just be clear for the audience here. Take a look at these beautiful books we're going to talk about, but you are an amazing writer.
Thank you. I'm still like learning to accept that. But my parents always saw strength in my voice and my writing, and they always encouraged me to express it. I don't think they realized it could be a career. Dress historian isn't quite a career I even thought of growing up in the United States. Even art historian is new to me, but dress historian, that's really specific. So I feel always very grateful that I could do this work. I tried going into business. I tried doing corporate work. It was so boring that I was exhausted all the time. And it wasn't until I wrote Tatreez Tea that I was like, this is where my energy is, and this is where my life's work belongs, you know?
Do you realize the amazing work you're doing? I mean, I'm just in shock and awe here. The level of work and the attention to the detail and the academic lens that you're doing this all through. I would never have appreciated that until meeting you just now.
Oh.
I mean, do you know how awesome that is?
I mean, I love what I'm doing, and I'm so grateful that I can have the conversations because it's all I think about. And I do think it's amazing. So thank you for saying that. I think I'm just so focused on the dresses that sometimes it does surprise me if somebody else is like, that's a good idea. Then I'm like, oh, okay. But I think I'm just very focused. I'm just so object centric that when people start to get involved beyond the people talking about the object, it takes some adjustment for me. But thank you for saying that.
Of course. So let's play a little game here, if you don't mind. If you had a time machine, what period would you want to go back to and study?
Late 19th century.
Okay.
Yeah, anytime between the mid to late, because that's when synthetic dyes emerged. And I'm really curious what mixes they were doing with the natural and synthetic dyes. I'm also really on this track. You can thank Hanan Manayr for this. Thank you, Miss Hanan. I'm very curious about sewing machines and when they actually came into the country, because we're seeing evidence of it on late 19th century dresses with late 19th century materials. So there's no evidence that it was sewn later. I feel like the late 19th century is a little bit of a pocket, but if I could shield myself from all the violence and terror that was occurring in the previous centuries, I would be very interested in the ancient world and how people dressed at that time, because I have theories about it based on funerary objects and busts and all of that. But I don't understand completely the social functions of what they were wearing, but they were clearly very important. So when I was at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, I spent half of that research fellowship in the Department of Ancient West Asian Art, where they have, you know, funerary sculptures, bronze type materials and reliefs and things like that. And, you know, for them, they're looking at who is this? What's the name of the person? Where was it? You know, they had the more archaeological perspective. I'm like, what are they wearing? Is that a coin or is that a gem? You know, I was looking at what they were wearing, and that really opened up my mind into like, what were they doing in the ancient world and why haven't more people been asking?
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
So if you're going to fast forward to today specifically, how are you leveraging AI, if at all?
Wow, that's a really good question. I have a very love-hate relationship with AI because it plagiarizes my work. And I see it in social media captions a lot, like where I see total lifts from my books, sentences I've written. I use it mainly as like a language refinement tool. I don't import oral history. I feel that's like a sacred type of content that does not belong in AI. So I try to publish it first, always. And then I never upload images of like dresses or historic photographs or of people. And I mainly use it as language refinement. I'm often in a space where I'm like, what's another word for, you know, this or something like that? Then I consult ChatGPT and AI. But I try to keep it very, very limited because I'm worried that it's going to regurgitate not only my work, like plagiarize it with other people. I don't know where all this information's going. And this is like sacred information. So I'm trying to get it in a book before it ends up in ChatGPT or AI. Yeah.
And we're used to people stealing our stuff. So that would be apropos if they stole, obviously, this through ChatGPT. But speaking of that, in all seriousness, I remember reading or watching something where you stated you would teach people. My phrasing may be incorrect, so I apologize, but teaching people how to design dresses, that's the way in my head it sort of is framed. But then you realize that they were using that and they wanted to basically use it for their own or show it off, basically steal from us. I guess that's what I'm trying to say, right? They're stealing the dresses from us or the designs from us or appropriating it in the way they want to. And I feel like you caught that at some point and you stopped allowing that to happen.
Okay, yeah. So what you're referring to is, first of all, there's a long legacy of cultural appropriation. And in my work, I have taught non-Palestinians and Palestinians. Now I don't teach at all, and I'll only do work with Palestinians. 2017 into the pandemic, I was teaching both non-Palestinians and Palestinians. I think Palestinians have every right. This is their inheritance. They want to restitch a dress. But with non-Palestinians, what I started to notice is that they were reaching out to me, asking for my blessing if they could stitch our designs, sell them, and then donate the proceeds to charity. And this was really upsetting to me because Palestinians want to earn vocation. They don't want to receive charity. Wouldn't it be a better effort for you not to stitch and donate, but instead to just purchase embroidery from Palestinian refugee camps and cooperatives? It started to alarm me that maybe there was more I could do to prevent that. So I started developing community guidelines because I was being requested these types of things through email so often, and I would require students to read the community guidelines. But I made a big statement about cultural appropriation and my position on it, and other Palestinians might have other opinions on this topic. So I'm not speaking for everybody, but for me and the Tatreez Institute, we do not support that. I don't know if I've really stopped it, but at least they don't have my endorsement. And I've stopped teaching non-Palestinians, not because I don't think that they should learn it, but I started after the genocide, I just changed. I don't want to teach anybody anymore. I don't even really want to sell anything anymore. Like I used to sell Syrian silk fabric and kits and all this other kind of stuff. I don't want to do any of that anymore. All I want to do is be a documentarian and write what I can while I can and hopefully help the next generation. But cultural appropriation, I think, has a long history worth writing about, actually.
But when you caught it, how did you feel at that very moment? Because it's like an aha moment for all of us when we catch something like that. We all in our profession catch it one way or another. But for you, how did you feel at that very moment? You're like, wait a minute, they're using us here. Something's not right.
Yeah, that first experience, she had asked me in front of the class on Zoom. It was during the pandemic. And she showed us the samples that she was going to sell. And in that moment, I realized like maybe I wasn't doing this right. Maybe I shouldn't do this. I don't want to do this. That's not what I came here to do. And maybe I need to make a stronger statement. It caused me to question myself. You know, I'm the teacher in the room. You know, I felt I had an obligation and duty to have prevented that. But at the same time, you know, you can't control everybody and not everybody is going to listen to your words anyways. But I at least wanted to make it clear that I didn't endorse it. But I felt really guilty at that time, a sort of seismic shift in my approach. That's kind of where it began. And I became more limited with who I taught.
As Palestinians know, education is resistance. Join us at the School of Radical Imagination, where community-based learning turns knowledge into action. Starting this January, you can take courses like Capitalism versus Love with Dr. Laura Basu, or Embodying Liberation with friend of the podcast, Ashira Darwish. Learn more and register at radicalimagination.school.
Both of us as Palestinians, obviously there's generational trauma after the Nakba and everything to follow, including the genocide. But you mentioned Syria earlier. Can you talk about your connection to Syria?
Yeah, my mother in 1948, when she was exiled, they walked to Syria, or they walked to the bus that took them to Syria. And so my mom grew up in Syria and went to university in Syria. And as a child, we didn't have connections in Palestine. So I didn't grow up going to Palestine over the summers and stuff. My home away from homeland was Syria. And that was the land my mother walked as a child and grew up. So I've always felt like deeply connected to Syria as like an extension of homeland for me.
Yeah, and there was a moment in time where Syria represented, what was happening in Syria, I should say, represented a very dark moment in your life. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. The last time I was in Syria, I was with my family and we stayed up all night eating and laughing and waiting for Mubarak to step down in Egypt. It was during the Arab uprisings. And he didn't that night. So we got up the next morning and decided to drive back to Jordan. 4 women in the car. I think I wrote about it in my book. And it wasn't until we got to the border control agents there on the Syrian side that no one was there. So we got out. We're like, what happened? Because you lose reception when you're out there. And they were partying because I guess Mubarak stepped down in the time that we just were like, dang it, we weren't there for the parties in the streets. And that was the last time I was in Syria. And arguably, I'd say that's when really the Syrian revolution began. Yeah. And shortly after, of course, then the brutal, massacre. I don't know what to call it, but for me, it was a great period of violence in Syria from the Assad regime. The people that caused me not to travel there anymore. I couldn't visit anymore, but I had family there. I had a lot of family there. And also my mom's like family friends and friends when she was in high school, and her first students in embroidery were there that I met in Yarmouk refugee camp. And when I was walking in Yarmouk, I remember someone goes, "Are you Feryal's daughter? You look like Feryal." I was like, yeah, her daughter. So it's like people knew that I was her daughter. It was like such a sense of home. But yeah, that was a pretty dark time for me because that was sort of the first time where I couldn't go back to the place where I felt I belonged. Even though that wasn't Palestine, that's what Syria functioned as for me growing up.
Better than Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Better than Oregon, right? Yeah. Closer to home.
Yeah.
And you sort of went into a depressive state, and you and I talked about this a little bit. I think we both have some experience around this. Can you just talk about that a little bit for the audience and that experience?
Yeah, I found myself really emotionally distraught. This was before the genocide, we all have to remember. So the type of imagery we've seen today is something that like has changed our core consciousness, like on a cellular level. At that time, we were seeing very graphic images on Facebook and martyr reports. And so I was scouring these martyr reports and images to try to see if my family was okay. And that's around the time I moved to Washington, D.C. and was around like a lot of political kind of activity and people and talking about politics and things like that. It was always on the top of my mind. It's hard because anything before 2023, I feel that the depression and the feeling I've carried and the grief I've carried over the last 2 years doesn't compare even to that time period. But that time period was so difficult because that there was the land, there were my family, there were our friends, and I still haven't been able to return since.
And how have you coped with that since then?
Oh, I guess I've stored it enough in the back of my mind, hoping that I can go back. I was surprised even at my experience when the Sidnaya prison information was revealed, when Assad's regime fell and Sidnaya prison, all the prisoners were released, and we saw some of the horrors that were happening there. That caused a huge wave of just feeling like the sense that if something happened to me, nobody would ask. I felt Sidnaya was where my aunt's villa was, my aunt and uncle that we would spend our summers in. So I spent a lot of my time as a young person in Sidnaya not knowing about the prison there. So to see Sidnaya in that light, it just triggered me. And at the same time, the genocide was happening. And I guess I just felt really lost in that. I don't know how to explain it. It's the sense that like if I was taken and thrown in a prison, would anyone ask? And it just felt like at that moment, and I know that people love me and I don't have that feeling all the time, but that time it felt like no one cared. No one cared about Palestinians. No one cared about Syrians. And some of the people that suffered in those prisons were caught and imprisoned for carrying baby formula. So it just deeply like shook my core.
Do people care about Syrians, about Palestinians? Because this is a question I always ask myself. Do people really care?
I don't know. I feel sometimes it's very performative if they do. But I know we care about each other. So feel like that matters. And that can't be forgotten or dismissed or reduced. I think we care about each other. And I think for me that matters.
And are you able to go back to Syria now? If you wanted to?
I take my cues from my mom.
Okay.
So when my mom feels safe to go, or any of my family, I think we're getting there, at least for me. I know that we've seen some tourist videos on social media and like people are going and stuff like that. But it seems like the time is coming soon. And I was just thinking the other day, like what it would feel like to go back. Would I feel scared or would I feel happy? And who's left? Is my family fled? I have some family still there, thank God. But, you know, many of the places I frequented and ate at and visited, my cousin's office, like in old Damascus, and when like we would hear Michael Jackson blasting down the road because the streets are so narrow, and just feeling like, where am I? You know, just those like cool moments where we're making kanafa over the heater. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know if I'll have those again, but I'm excited for the chance.
You're going to want your son to have that, though.
I do. I want him to. I really want him to. I want him very much to experience. And Jordan's lovely and wonderful. And, you know, I always feel like sort of a third home there. But there's something about the land being walked on by your mother
Yeah.
that feels really important. So, of course, Palestine will always reach that like number one space. But Mama also like grew up in a house in Syria and went to university there. And, you know, so it's different.
So what are you teaching your son about Palestine and Syria?
I think this is kind of the approach my mom took with us. She would always say that if, you know, in exile, you can lose yourself and you're not going to feel like you belong anywhere, but you do belong here in yourself and what's inside here. So I focus very much with my son, the strength of his own character, the strength of his understanding of his culture. I'm not an extraordinarily religious person, but I do think that's important to navigate while you're there. So I try to teach him all the answers to all the things, you know, and all the, you know, prayers and things like that so that he can make the choice that he wants to make later. But I focus very much on that like cultural core, because I think if he is secure in himself, then no one can tell him otherwise.
You know he's going to be proud of you when he's older, when he realizes what you've accomplished, right?
I hope so. I ask him sometimes, I'm like, do you know what I'm doing? Do you know why we're surrounded in dresses? And so if he's like, yeah, because of the Tatreez and because of the thob. And, you know, he'll go wash his hands and help me move the dress and stuff. So I'm hoping, but I don't know. I look forward to the day I can see the sparkle in his eye. I hope, because that's all of our goals, is to make our children proud. Yeah.
It will happen. I guarantee it. Yeah. To talk about the Tatreez Institute a little bit and why you created it.
It was all very organic. I first began with Tatreez Tea as my pen name because that was my first book, and began teaching in 2017 under that pen name. But then a few years ago, I decided to like alter the name. So I feel like the practice has been going on since 2017, but I changed the name to the Tatreez Institute. And what has happened and why I found that to be important is because I started to amass a dress collection very organically. So I moved away from teaching. I moved away from like selling products and stuff over the last few years. And I've moved more into research. But what I found with the museum world is that there are protocols. You can't touch the garments. You can't try them on. You can't wear them. Like the only reason I even asked the question of what a woman sounded like in her headdress because I wore one and realized how loud it is. And I couldn't even really hear very much what was going on because it was like I was moving so much. Wearing and like understanding the function and form of our dress and how it's fashioned, I feel matters intimately in my work, especially as a Palestinian dress historian, writing about Palestinian, Syrian, Jordanian, Lebanese dress, hopefully Lebanese dress soon, and the next generation potentially, you know, receiving that knowledge. I started to amass this collection so I could try it on, so I could touch it. It's a study collection, a touch collection. And now I just counted last night because I got a new donation. It's at 184 dresses, headdresses, and garments,
Wow.
which is a lot for an individual collector. I'm not a museum. And that's mainly been the premise of my work, is to study, research, publish.
Mm. Are we going to open a museum? I know you partnered with others already, but are we going to open one? When I say we, like I'm helping you. Okay.
Well, if you can. Yes, I'd like for there to be a space for the public to access it. I'm making it publicly accessible through publications and then hopefully through like some exhibition. But some of the dresses are shredded. Like a museum wouldn't accept it. You can't sell it on the market. I take dresses that have been completely worn to tatters because I'm interested in what life did to the dress. I don't want some pristine, unworn garment.
Right.
So I can't put them all on exhibition. They're fragile, but I hope so. I want eventually to find a space. The collection is growing to the point where, the dresses are taking over. Let me just put it like that. They're in my dreams. They're hanging on the doors. They're in the trunks. They're in the closet. They need their own space.
Yeah. Wait, could you do a virtual museum? I don't know if that's already available where they can look at all the dresses from the different time periods.
One of my former students, Jay, they started coming. They live in New Mexico. I try to get them out here and they help me professionally photograph. I'm trying to get that, but that requires good record keeping. I finally was able to tag all the dresses last year. And then now I'm going through all the donor records through my email and like importing them because I've properly identified everything, but I want there to be a provenance of like, how did the dress come to DC or New York or wherever I acquired it. So hopefully, I'm just, the record keeping for that is a bit of a bear.
So to the audience, we got to help her open a museum. Let's get donations right now if we can. Would you mind talking about your different books? And I mentioned to you, my daughters are obsessed with THOBNA. I actually had to sneak it out of their bedroom just to bring it and take a picture of it, actually, and send it to you as well. Could you just talk about each of the books and why you added the coloring book, which is amazing?
Oh, thank you. Yes, so Tatreez Tea was my very first book. And that was one that my mother had always told me that she wanted me to write. So when I first wrote it, it was intended on being an oral history documentation only. I didn't read any other Palestinian embroidery books. I didn't want to incorporate any other research. It was pure oral history. And at that time, I received 4 grants to do it from arts councils in Oregon and New York. Brooklyn Arts Council was a big one. And they helped me fund the book. That was all about my mother's collection, which is interesting because that's how our ancestors collected. They didn't collect other people's dresses. They collected their own family and their own makings. It's kind of interesting. That's like a traditional collection, right?
So the tea is essentially spilling the tea.
Oh, yes.
Right? Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Tatreez was meant to be the more like technical piece. The tea was meant to capture 2 things. It was mainly like the tea recipes that we, made during our stitching circles because we were young. So we didn't do coffee. I think a lot of older people do coffee. And then the tea, there's a lot of, it's spilling of the tea. Yeah, because you say a lot when you're not having to look at someone and you're just looking at your hands.
Yeah.
There's a lot of storytelling in that. THOBNA was always meant to be like a sort of a bookend, if I should say, to my teaching. I had like such a sense of urgency when I wrote it. It was in the spring and summer of 2023, and it came out June or July 2023. I didn't know what it was, but I was like, I have to write this. I have to do it now. And mainly it's about Intifada dresses and the Intifada embroideries, digitizing those. Some of my former students of the Tatreez Institute created other types of resistance patterns like calligraphy of depopulated villages and all of this kind of stuff. So I intended on just sort of summarizing all the things I've taught in my classes and then creating a resource on resistance patterns. And again, I had no idea where that sense of urgency came. But then a few months later, of course, October 2023 came, and then it sort of all made sense. I was like, oh, but yeah, even the cover of the book is the back of the embroidery, because if you look at all other Palestinian embroidery books, so you see the front, I wanted to look at the back. So it was meant to be like this kind of message to everyone that let's start looking closer. And then I created Tatreez Beauty because I had some designs that were produced by a designer years ago that they gave me of all these different thobs. I have full rights to them and they gave them to me and I paid for them and they were like, publish them. So I put them together. I mean, I've always wanted to write a children's book. So I hope that's in my future. I already have so many ideas for a children's book. But this is kind of the closest that I got to it. Just share a little bit about me learning and then sharing some old images of children because I'm amassing another area in my journal is like evidence of children's dress and Palestinian embroidery that I'm really building. Actually, there's a lot of embroidery in these museums for children. They just don't call it children's dress. It's so interesting. So there was a sort of beginning underpinnings of that research. And I just really wanted to make a resource available in stitching circles that were starting to become very popular at that time last year. If people wanted to bring their children to a stitching circle and have some coloring sheets. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So how often are you writing and sort of reflecting?
I write almost every day.
Okay. What did you write today, if anything, yet?
I haven't written yet today. Yazan Kupti is a fellow at National Geographic. And right now his Instagram, Imagining the Holy, he's sharing images from the 1950s and 60s in Palestine that were colorized. And I noticed in one of the images there was variegated threads and it was dated 1968. And our history books say variegated threads didn't come until the 1980s, maybe late 1970s. That was my little note I needed to jot down today. It predates the 80s. So how far back can we take the variegated thread as that gradient thread that changes color in a single thread? So I'm curious, like when people started to incorporate that because it helps me to date the dresses.
Right. So you really do live and breathe this. It's amazing.
Yeah.
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 That's awesome.
It's a real place of comfort for me. Yeah.
So I want to talk about the dresses, but I want to share something with you. I'm going to try not to get emotional about it too. So my mother passed away in, I think, 2001. She passed away of cancer. And she had many thobes in her closet. But the relatives that helped us move accidentally donated all of her clothes, including the thobes. So like my wife can't have them, obviously, or my daughters or anything like that. So I'm more interested in the thobes just mainly because of that. So if you could talk about it and educate us. And that's why I brought up where I'm from, Elbira and stuff like that too.
Oh my goodness. What a huge loss. I'm so sorry to hear that. I know though that the dresses go where they're meant. So before I talk about the dresses, I don't know if it gives you any comfort at all, but when the dresses come to me, I know they're meant for me. I never buy the dresses because when they come to me, they are work emotionally.
Yeah.
They enter my dreams. Some of them are not very nice in my dreams. Like the dresses find their way around and they have their own voice.
Well, learning about you made me feel better because I know what you're doing and I know the meaning behind all of your work. So I hope it landed with you, to be honest with you. I'd rather it be you than somebody else, obviously. So, but no, I absolutely appreciate that.
If you have any pictures of her wearing them, then I'll keep a lookout because I'm always getting links for things. Oh, can you get this? You should add this to the collection.
Yeah,
so,
of course.
Well, the first dress here is actually one of the most, I don't know, I have a very like strong relationship with her because she was found in a dumpster in California.
You can grab it if you want and show it.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Rescued from the dump. That's what I wrote. But anyways, it's 2022, I think. She's one of the dresses in THOBNA. And it was behind like some vintage store and she was getting thrown away. And I just took it sight unseen. Someone wrote me on Instagram and was like, I found this. I think it's Palestinian. I'll send it to you. So I said, okay. And I received it. And the material, I don't know if you want to feel it, but it's early era Habar fabric here. Do you see how that is? Like it's a silky fabric. Mm-hmm. This was produced in the 1950s, so early Exile in the refugee camps. So that's why it's so worn out. If you look here, you can see where she belted it and that there's stains on it here. But Habar was very popular. Habar like ink, black ink. But Habar fabric was very important during this time because of a couple things. It imitated silk, so they didn't have to have like money or access in the refugee camps to like Syrian silks. But also if you scrunch it up in your hand and you let it go, it doesn't wrinkle. so they could sit down, get up, move around. It's like a dress you could wear all day without it getting wrinkled.
So they had wrinkle-free before wrinkle-free.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, habar. And there are eras of habar, actually. So this became a very special dress to me because at that very time, look at the coincidence. And I don't know if anything's coincidence. It's nasib, destiny. I was studying about habar. And they were like, Wafa, we need to get you habar. How do you not know what habar feels like? And I was like, I don't know. I'm in the United States. I have nothing here. Muslims don't let me touch anything. I was like, I'm sorry, And then somebody donates this and I go, is this habar? I sent them pictures and Jordan, they're like, that's habar. That's exactly what I was talking about. So it just was like the most perfect timing she came into my life. I mean, I just really love her in the story. And I try to keep her as visible as possible because if I was about to be thrown in the trash, I'd feel pretty rotten. Just so beautiful. And if you look very closely on the embroidery on the green, you can see just how much care and delicate work was done by the woman who made this.
You say her. Do you give it a name as well?
No. But yeah, it's a her. Yeah. They're each kind of alive to me. I guess that's how I am. I have a lot of empathy for the objects and then for the dresses, and I see the life that was worn in it, and I see the essence of the woman who was here and like signs of her life. And that makes me so happy to see that the dress was loved and that it was an extension of her. And if you think about it, this is the closest thing to her body. And so we don't know who she is, the woman who made and wore this, but this is sort of what's left of her. And so I guess that's where I call it her.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah. Do you want me to go over
Sure,
more
you don't
dresses?
mind. Yeah.
Okay, well, we don't want this. It's not going to get wrinkled, but I'm going to go here.
Wrinkle-free.
Yeah. This is very long. So I mean, the one reason I wanted to bring it is because I wanted to point out that I'm not the only tall Palestinian woman in history. This dress was made for a woman my height in Ramle in the 1920s, 1930s. And I love it because there was no extension added to it. It was made for this woman and it was never shortened. It was never shortened. It was always meant to be this length and it was worn. It was very well worn and it goes right to my ankles. I'm 6'2.5". Oh. So I just really love this because it tells me that Palestinian women were tall like me.
It really does give a story.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And then I kind of wondered, I'm like, gosh, she had to do so much embroidery just to get it down her legs. I mean, like, that's a lot of embroidery to do that. But yeah, this is why I like this one. These two here, I actually most recently purchased them from Jerusalem from afar last year. And this top one is from Ramallah, I think from the 20s, 30s. It's like early form, like cotton thread, when cotton thread was first getting imported into Palestine. And I really love it because you see kind of the evolution of dress even under the British mandate. And then this.
Shout out Ramallah.
Yeah, Ramallah. And then this one is from Gaza. And I love the Gaza everyday dresses. There were a few different styles, let's just say, of dress in Gaza before 1948. But one of the least talked about and collected is the everyday dress because it has the least amount of embroidery. And one way that my work has evolved over the many years that I've been doing this is I had to grow out of embroidery. I couldn't just focus on embroidery because that was a very selective group of villages and regions that practiced embroidery. But other regions and villages and cities engaged in traditional dressmaking practices, but through bold fabrics and colors, through coins, through other embellishments and adornments. And to focus only on embroidery narrowed that scope. I couldn't focus on Palestine as a whole. Gaza, for instance, had very little embroidery. You can see on the neckline, it's a V-neck, first of all, which is unique.
Yeah. And
then they have like a few amulets here stitched. That was it. And this is their everyday dress. And this one has Majdalawi fabric from Majdal from multiple generations. So if you look on this dress, you can see there's some patch that was placed here of a more recent fabric. It's right around the stomach. So I don't know if it got stretched out because the woman was pregnant, but it was clearly replaced. And the rest of the fabric on this looks like it's early 20th century, so before 1948. Just the way it was woven, the materials it was used in under the magnifier, You can see the weave structure. It was hand woven. This more vibrant color came more into the 50s and 60s. And this was definitely more vibrant, but you can see the differences here. So I really love this. I really love looking at all the different ways that art dress emerges. Another area of my work is tourist market pieces, because what is my positionality? I'm in the United States. So I'm seeing what American tourists purchased and brought back to the United States. In some cases, they were traditional. In other cases, those Palestinian sellers in Jerusalem were selling them not very authentic stuff because they couldn't tell. They know Americans can't tell the difference. And they don't. But then what happens is they came into the U.S., museums acquired them and presented them as authentic forms of heritage. They didn't realize they were tourist amalgamations. So in any case, when Gaza specifically, they started adding embroidery to these dresses. So I have maybe 5 or 6 of these where an embroidery chest panel was added on top. And I definitely see that they wore them. Like Gaza women, Majdalawi women definitely wore them this way. But then there are some versions where they just don't look like they would have been worn. Like they're very thick and unwearable, kind of, I would be heavy to wear. Like it was clearly just ramped, the embroidery was ramped up so they could sell it on the tourist market because apparently American tourists wanted to buy embroidery. So yeah, there's another area there of research. Yeah.
This may sound weird, but I feel like with you specifically, you have this interesting talent where if you touch the dress, you go back in that time like a flashback. Is that fair to say? Do you feel that sort of energy when you're going through the dresses?
Yeah, I don't talk about it very much because I feel like I don't know how people perceive that kind of a statement.
I perceive it well, so it's just you.
But yeah, there's something about feeling, and I don't know if it has to do from when I was really little where I was very visually impaired and I couldn't really see that well. And a lot of my ability to navigate the embroidery was like feeling my way through. I have a lot of intelligence in my hands. And I think everybody does, but you have to practice that muscle memory. And so, yeah, I feel like that's where the touch collection I felt like was really needed for me, was because I didn't fully understand a dress unless I could touch it. And there is a bit of time travel, but then there's like this connection to the maker, to see her stitches, to inspect her stitches, to see how she knotted, to see how consistent her stitches were, to see where she didn't care. Like in this dress for Ramallah, if you open it up.
I'm going to get criticized. Can you share that to the audience too?
Yes. I should.
Shout out Elbira.
And
then Ramallah.
But the one thing that I really found to be so delightful was if you look at it's not the sleeve, but if you look on the way the birds were treated, like you see, like this one, the bird has like one wing that's blue, mainly black, and a little couple stitches of blue on the top. So she had a little whimsy. This one has red embroidery. And then look at this one. Here's a bird with yellow body and blue head and wings. So it's like, I don't know. She was just a little silly. And I wonder sometimes, it makes me wonder, like, who was she? And like, does she have kids? Because I feel like that's what I would do. Like, I would add something kind of silly and be like, do you see a bird that's yellow and blue? And they'd be like, oh, that one. You know, like I could just like kind of see how her whimsy might have been a part of like her laughter, her personality, her role as a mother. And, you know, this isn't like factual, historic, like, you know, type of reporting. But there is this like spiritual experience I have with the dresses, that these dresses were on people's skin, on their bodies. It's weird to me that anybody would think they wouldn't carry some spiritual significance in our lives.
And these dresses have probably seen things that you and I could never imagine.
Right. Exactly. What have they witnessed? What have they seen? And actually, I think that's a really great point, is material, especially historic material, bore witness. And I think that's where I feel so assured, because over the last 2 years, we bore witness on our phones, and it didn't feel like that was enough. And it wasn't enough. And it makes me worry, like, is my mind not going to remember all of this because it was so traumatic and we have ways of surviving and all of that. But the material does. Everything in our culture carries memory and bears witness. And we see evidence of life and death. And there's no way to hide it or obscure it or distort it. And that's what my mother actually quoted in Tatreez Tea that she always said is she said, people can distort our words, but no one can distort my thob. My thob always tells the truth. And that just has felt like one of the most profound things she's ever really said to me or passed to me wisdom-wise.
Is there ever a point, or was there that one dress that you touched and you held and you immediately broke down in tears or got emotional even? Tricky question, I know. I'm sorry, but
No, because they're all moving.
yeah.
There was one dress that's in the Met's collection, and I wrote about it in my essay, Tatreez in Time. The little I was allowed to write about it, I wrote. And I had a deeply emotional connection, and I still do with that dress. The chest panel is very sloppily done, and there's tons of beads in it. It's not the work of an elder or a mother. It's a child's work. And the length of it, 128 centimeters, is like that of a 10 to 12-year-old child at that time, late 19th century. That's at least what me and Hasan kind of came up with. The skirt is perfectly done, perfectly embroidered. So you can tell the mother was like, I'm doing that.
Let me finish this part.
Let me do this and you do that. And she was like, I want beads. And she was like, fine, just add the beads. And who would have ever thought this Ramallah girl, 10 to 12 years old, 19th century, would have her dress at the Metropolitan Museum of Art? But she did. And I was the first on record to request that viewing to see that dress. And she had a lot to say. So I have more to write about her in the future. But that one was very moving because that's someone's first thob. And that's the work of a mother and daughter. And she had all these beads, like beautiful beads, just glass beads and coral beads and all woven into the dress. It was just so remarkable. It was so remarkable.
You know, when you're speaking of that younger girl, it makes me wonder, what message would you give your younger self? Going back to a 13 or 12-year-old, what would that one message be?
I would tell myself not to listen to anyone. I know that's like horrible words to give a preteen.
Sounds very Palestinian. We don't listen to anybody anyway.
Don't listen to anyone. You know who you are.
Yeah.
And I think that's like the thing that I keep returning to all the time, even as an adult, is I know who I am. I know who I am. And I'm going to continue on, even not just to the world, but even within our own community. There's a lot of division and difficulty in relationships, a lot of trauma that operates in our own community where there's significant judgment and all this kind of stuff. And even in that, I have to, lazim imsik hali, like I have to hold on to myself and say, no, I know who I am. And you just stay on your path, stay focused. I so often visualize myself carrying a candle. I've been carrying it for a long time. So I can't run too fast with the candle, but I do have to have a little bit of a jog, and I have to keep that slow burn going. So that's how I view my work. I have to keep going, stay focused, and not move too fast, not move too slow. And that's, I think, where I have to live, not overreact or underreact, not move too fast, not move too slow. There is urgency, but make sure it's correct, make sure it's accurate. That barometer, it's like, what would you do with a candle in your hand?
It makes me wonder, what do you want your legacy to be? Let's just say 50, 60, 70 years from now. Because you're going to have a very powerful legacy. I'm on record right now saying that.
Oh, I just want to make the next generation proud that I carried this heritage and our traditions forward with care and delicacy and with the highest degree of accuracy, that they can depend on my word. I don't like publishing historical information that I haven't validated more than 3 times in 3 different sources. And when I share something I've personally experienced, I try to make sure and contextualize that that's my experience. So I try to be very clear about my wording, and I just hope that clarity is appreciated by the next generation, and that I've inspired the next generation of researchers that can do this as work.
Yeah.
That's what I hope. Yeah.
They need to give you a PhD just based on your work already. Can we get somebody honorary PhD maybe? What do you think about that?
I'm happy to earn the PhD.
You've earned it already. Your body of work has earned it. This is real life research, right? Hands-on. So you've already earned it. I'll print it for you and say thank you. We'll say Palestine University.
I'll take it. Yeah. I'll take that with such great pride. Not to be my own contrarian. I accept that praise. So thank you. The headdress and face veil research is such a tremendous amount of data. I need help. So I am looking towards doctoral research for that help. I mean, we have done XRF analysis on metal coins, different coins on a single headdress where I know what's the difference between material. We've done dye analysis on one of my face veils in the collection at the Met. Thank you, Rachel Lackner and the Scientific Research Department. And Federico Caro, I have to say. So many people have contributed, and I have so much data on that I need help. And that's where I'm moving next, because I need faculty advisor. The trajectory of time is so tremendous. I mean, who is bridging ancient to modern world? Like, that's a very hefty amount of research to do. And so, yeah, I have my life's work ahead of me still. But for what I've done so far, thank you. It means a lot. I firstly had wanted to make my mom feel that her legacy was being remembered.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you sort of touch upon this, but what's your future research now? What's next for you? What are you going to be focusing on?
Yeah, it's headdresses and face veils.
Okay.
I think I'm always looking for a challenge with the dresses. There's many areas on the dresses that I've found no one's documented, or there's so little. I can barely touch it, barely remember it. On children's dress, baby's dress, recycled dresses, intergenerational dresses, tourist dresses, all these different areas, material that has made its way to the United States that I can speak about, because I have so many different collections, including my own, that carry that material without a story. So that's where I'm going next. And then again, the headdress face veil research is just so big. I mean, the fact I was even just only focused on headdresses at the Met. And then when I left, when my fellowship and scholarship ended there, I started looking at the face veils. And then I was like, well, nothing's been written really about the face veils. So I'm like, now I have to do headdresses and face veils. And so then that compounded the work. But that's all headdress.
Yeah.
That's all dress on the head. So I felt like I could do it.
I'm surprised jewelers and these other designers haven't reached out to you, or maybe they have, for your assistance in designing things from the past. Trying to get you some revenue here too. So.
They're going to be folded into the research because that's the evolution of headdress. I definitely admire so many of those designers out there that are interacting with the material in this way and evolving it, because headdresses traditionally were only made by the elders and the most skilled in the village. They weren't taught in every household. So for the designer student, that's just very much in the tradition. Of course, you'd want the best seamstresses, tailors, right, and designers to be working on this. I am actually most interested in working on cinema and film in historic dress authentication, because the one thing I've noticed in Palestinian film that is severely lacking is that their dress ensembles that they include don't match the time period. It's upsetting to the point I can't watch it. It's like they're wearing a 1980s dress and placed in the 1930s. And it's like that wasn't available then. Or they're wearing something very machine embroidered and saying it's the 1960s. They weren't doing it that way. They had machine embroidery, but it was not like that. They had less functionality on the sewing machine. So I hope to do more authentication in cinema and film. I'm not even thinking about income generation. I'm just thinking about the next generation. They're going to be looking at these films as our main form of storytelling. So I want them to know what the dresses were, of that time.
I need to get you in contact with Watermelon Pictures, Alana. I don't know if you've already seen or heard about Watermelon Pictures.
I have
Right?
heard
Yeah,
of them. Yeah.
And Hamza, I think, is the founder. I hope I got his name right. Got to connect you with him.
Okay.
See if there's something there.
Yeah, I would love to. I mean, I require consultation fees and stuff like that, but it's definitely an area that I think needs a lot of help. Any rendering of Palestinian dress, there should be some authentication. I have even reached out to Palestinian women in the limelight who wear traditional dress because they then turn around and post about the dress. And it's not always correct. They don't even have to cite me. I just want them to provide correct historical information and at least know what they're wearing. I'm also not a big like Y2K thobe kind of gal. Like if they're going to do historic, like let's stop at the 80s. Like that's sort of the cutoff. Anything after that is a little too mass produced for me, but that's just my historic taste.
No. So I have like a list of honors and work that you've done and accomplished. I mean, I just couldn't stop the pages from printing. So I'm, New York Foundation of the Arts Fellowship, Art and Resistance Museum of the Palestinian People, curator, Museum of the Palestinian People, senior fellow, Metropolitan Museum of Art, profiled by Vogue, which is really awesome. Iconic image, by the way. That's awesome.
Thank you.
You've been interviewed by many different groups and organizations. What's the one thing that you look at and you're like, wow, I'm happy I accomplished that, or something that you really want to look back at and say, I'm proud of? By the way, for the audience, there's many more that I didn't even touch upon.
Aww.
So, yeah.
I'm proud of so many things, but I'm very proud of my fellowship at the Metropolitan Museum of Art because that truly situated my work within academia. And after that, I became a sort of a consult for a number of museums like the Art Institute of Chicago, and who has a current exhibit that I consulted on, the Ramallah Ensemble.
Nice.
On Loss and Absence. It's going on now. Victoria and Albert Museum, I'm working with them on Thread Memory. That's curated by Rachel Dudman. National Gallery of Singapore. The Met really opened the door for me in so many ways. And I'm so grateful to those at the Met that continue today to support my work and help me do analyses and answer my questions. Like they are advisors for life. Like they're my mentors for life. And I think they view me the same way. It's a very two-way street. But I'm just so grateful for everything that the Met brought me in terms of community.
It's an amazing accomplishment. So let me ask you, just a few more questions really, but let me ask you, what question did I not ask that I should have?
I think one aspect of the work that's become really important to me today is citing sources. And I want to give advice like for the next group, because I see a lot of people teaching Palestinian embroidery, conducting stitching circles. Some people even have begun writing more about Palestinian embroidery. And I'm so glad because I can't cover all this territory on my own. And everyone has a different perspective. So even if me and one other person are focused on the same topic, they might come up with different data than I do. That's how it should be. Like there are 8,000 essays on like a single relief at the Met. Like we should have that on a single dress at the Met. So the one thing that I would advise is not to shy away from citing your sources, because I notice some folks maybe aren't clear on who said what. And we need to get clear on that, because as Indigenous culture and as an Indigenous practice, knowledge lineage is important and it empowers our work. So who you cite says something about who you are. Now, if you don't cite anybody, that also says something about who you are, but you also stand alone.
Yeah.
So if that researcher was wrong, you actually become wrong, and now you need to defend that. So instead, why don't we stand together? So I really just encourage people to move out of ChatGPT and out of AI to really engage in some of the questions that they themselves have that ChatGPT won't be able to answer. It's just lifting and refining language from the internet. A lot of it's not true. And start exploring the questions that you have and seek at least 3 sources for anything you claim to be a heritage practice. So being very clear on that will allow us to preserve this for the next generation. Without that, it's a wash in social media and it's not going to be used hopefully it won't, a lot of this invalid kind of material that's appearing in content online will be erased because a lot of it's so wrong. But we want more Palestinians engaging in the research and writing and listening to elders and documenting what elders say. So that's really what I hope we can start encouraging more and more.
Have you thought about doing a documentary on all of your work and the dresses, maybe on watermelon pictures or something like that? I don't know. Have you thought about that?
I haven't thought about it. I always feel like I have so much more to do. If it's of interest, I'm happy to talk about it. But I still feel I have so much more to do. I have so much more to gain. The more you learn, the more you realize you don't know what you don't know. And I feel that there's so much I don't know, especially being in the United States. And that documentary would have to include my elders,
As it should.
As it should, yeah.
I'm going to leave the final word to you. Anything you'd like to say? You can say anything you want. You can ask anything you want.
If you're ever in a position to inherit a dress and the maker is still alive, ask her about it and write it down or record it and share it with someone who can publish it or you publish it. But if you have the privilege of being in the presence of a maker of a dress and she's giving you her dress, you have to ask her something about it. Where was this made? What were the conditions? Where did you get the thread from? Did you get the fabric from the same place? Why did you pick this fabric? What does this design mean to you? Write it all down, because that's what we need for the future of this field. More stories, more Palestinian voices.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time. This was such an awesome conversation. I learned so much. I told you I'm a big geek, so
it's such a pleasure. Thank you for having me, and thanks for bringing this all out of me because, I felt very comfortable. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Listen, stay tuned because it's time for Sumud.